is $450. Significantly more expensive than the Switch, which was 300. We got up $150, right? I wonder how people feel about this. It's not so outrageous that's like, oh, what? How could they ever? Right? There are meaningful, seriously meaningful updates and upgrades. It has 4K 60 potentially, 1080p 120 potentially, which is huge. The Switch undocked is 1080p, which is nice. It should have never not been that on the Switch 1, but hey, here we are. The game chat stuff is part of it. I gotta be fair, right? I gotta be fair and say, firstly, you guys are late to the party. That being said, you guys are the people who came late to the party, and not like the cool kind of late, but like late to where it's like, hey, this like it was like the party was like 6 hours. You're coming in at like the last hour, but this last hour is going to be unforgettable because you brought all the stuff that people want to have at the party, and all the greatest hits of drinks or whatever, and gave it a new life, right? And I think the game chat, like visually, is pretty cool. I think getting the camera and stuff like that, specifically for like the game chat in itself, I think works well. It being used in games and stuff like that, I think could be fun too. I think again, in an age of streamers, that is where I think that would get the most like valued use. You know, when I'm playing with anybody, I don't really like on any system across anything. I'm just in Discord most of the time or in the game council's chat. Just, you know, we just hear each other. That's all we really need to do, right? The game sharing was actually I like the most because there are times when I'll be playing a game with like my brothers that, oh, where are you at? Or what are you doing? And it's kind of hard for us to communicate like where we are. But we could just see all four of our like, you know, screens at the bottom and still playing and like seeing everything that's going on our screen, just a little bit smaller. I like the layout of that. I think having it with the camera is really cool for streamers. I could see people, I could see something like RDC World playing like the Mario Party with like that sort of going on. I think like their community would love that, right? So I could definitely see stuff like that being a big hit for streamers. I think people who aren't streamers will still use it, but I think it's gonna be less so. Like I can still see myself using the game chat, obviously, and the screen sharing. I think that's a great quality of life thing. I think if I was at Sony and Xbox, I was like, hey y'all, we gotta mimic that because that's something that we could just do as a download, as a you know as an update to the system, and would be probably you know accepted would be very well received, right? So Switch 2, right? $450. PlayStation 5, right? 500 at the time that they came out. But the thing is, like, this is coming out way later, like 5 years after the PlayStation 5. To be fair, you couldn't get PlayStation 5 right away. But this is coming out 5 years after the PlayStation 5. You can find PlayStation 5s now easily. You could get one used or refurbished or whatever for a lower price. So I think this comes into like an interesting place. If it would have been 400, I think I would have been like, oh man, like they hit it. And it's funny how much of a difference $50 can make, because 450 is like, okay, you cannot understate the mobility of the Switch, right? And that's local game sharing is awesome. Actually, I'm gonna put it like this, y'all. I think it's coming off like I'm a little bit of like I hope like a little bit of a hater. I'm not. I think this is a great console from everything I've seen. Seriously, I think the local play, right? You having the game and your friends not necessarily having it. Then hey, I got Super Smash Bros. Let's all play Super Smash Bros. I got Mario Kart. I got Mario Party. Whatever 4-player multiplayer game that's compatible with that, I got it. We can all play it together, right? That's cool. You and all your friends also need to have Switch 2s though, right? So that's a caveat. But in the scenario where you're assuming that you and your friends, the people you're playing with, you're all playing on the Switch 2 generally, then yes. I mean, you know, you only play stuff with multi. You can only share a game on PlayStation if somebody has a PlayStation 5. You know what I mean? From PlayStation 5 to PlayStation 5. So it's just, you know, I'm not trying to say like, you know, It's just a thing that like, oh, all four people have to have that. Like, you have a Switch One, it won't work from what I've seen. It's not the biggest thing in the world, but something to note, right? But it's a cool feature, right? I actually really like the game sharing and game chat, the implementation of it. I actually like that quite a bit. That is one of those things that's like the quality of life is just so good that it's unexpectedly like having an effect on me. The games that they were showing, awesome. I would give it like a solid, like a soft like 9 out of 10, like an 8.5. I think there's some heavy hitters. I think if they would have set it off with like one more new crazy game on the level of like that Mario Kart, I think then they would have like probably actually would bumped it up to an 11 out of 10. If they had a Super Smash Bros, this would be 11 out of 10. Everything about it, right? But yeah, so $450 I think is a great price, but like just for what it is, but also still more than what I was kind of expecting. And I think still the strongest aspect of the Switch is that it is that you can take it with you, that it can be mobile, right? So having a mobile console now that can play Elden Ring, I don't know how good it can play it, but games of that nature is pretty cool. I'm still curious, like, just like a lot of things, like how many games are gonna be coming to Switch that or like PlayStation hits, like God of War or whatever else, right? It may never, but like as far as like, because like those games, those are those AAA, super high quality games that like when like the Switch tried to do like the Mortal Kombat game, like the infamously bad renderings. Like if you download the same game on Switch 2, will it just look better or is it going to still look like trash, right? Will they have to make a new version of it compatible with the Switch 2, right? Will it be largely like, is the Switch 2 as capable as the PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series X? My guess is no. My guess is no, it's not. Because a lot of the games that they show generally is like it's all very stylized. So you don't have these crazy high textures on like every single model and in the world and all that, right? And you can get away with a lot more in a stylized game in terms of like the experience of a like AAA game, but not necessarily the visuals of something like Demon Souls, right? And so with that said, I think if you did just hypothetically bring the God of War Ragnarok to Switch, just in this hypothetical, I don't think it would play as good. Like I think the 4K 60 that you get on the PlayStation 5 or the Pro, I don't think you could take the same game and like put it onto this Switch and get it. I think a lot of the 4K 60 is dependent on a lot of these games being very stylized and just lower fidelity in general. So they still look good, but generally speaking, a lot of these characters probably don't have nearly as many like polys as say Cloud and Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. That being said, they had a remake Intergrade, which is also significantly like Rebirth is a huge, massive game. You know what I mean? So I'm curious how it runs because it's up to 4K 60. So I'm guessing for games like that, you could probably do the 1080p higher frame rates or like 4K 30. This is all speculation. I guess we could see HCR, that's great. VRR up to 120. You got to be careful with the up to 120 frames per second, right? The PlayStation 5 Pro can go up to 8K technically. But I think only like two games, like No Man's Sky and one of the racing games, can do that, right? Game chat. I mean, late, but it's the good kind of late to the party where at least they've made it look clean. Let's see. Use the included act to connect to this D unless you're greater. Hold on. Play in 4K when you connect the Switch to and frame rates up to, because so it's saying you can do up to 4K and you do up to 120 frames per second. clearly those are different sentences. It's not you can do 4K 120. Not that I don't think anybody got that from the video. Fan ventilation, TV connection is cool. All right, so I don't think that they really talk too much about the frame rates are capped at 60 frames per second for 4K output. So that's just the max that it could do generally, right? Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the Pro can go above 4K 60 technically. It just kind of depends on the games. But again, we're talking about like it's going to be different for every single game, right? Stand. Here's the other thing, guys. Seriously, here's a very big thing. The Nintendo Switch was $300, right? When your Joy-Cons inevitably started to drift, everybody had a pair of Joy-Cons that started to drift, if not multiples, right? It's $80 to replace it, just to replace it. And then if you want to get multiples, right? If you want to get 4 sets of these, so you could do 4-player on a game, right? That would be an additional $240. Now, to be fair, PlayStation 5 controllers were also expensive. However, you could get deals on them around holidays and stuff where instead of the $70 price point for the controllers, it'd be like $40, right? So that's the thing is like, I think if you are patient enough, like you can spend less on in the long term of like your PlayStation 5 to your Switch, time, I guess we'll say. Generally, obviously, I think it would vary, but I know people, families with kids, where the controllers would just not last at all because they just start drifting. They're just constantly buying new Switch controllers, right? I think if you're a generally, tame adult, then maybe not so much. But again, that mobility of the Switch cannot be understated. I think it's still a good price. This camera though is like, how much does the camera cost? Does it tell us? Accessories. The Pro controller is $80? Yo, this is what I'm talking about. $80? And I guarantee you it's not better than the PlayStation 5 controller. I guarantee you. Wow. What the fuck? Y'all, the controllers are now $90. This is what I'm talking about, guys. The PlayStation 5 controllers are 70, I think, right? Let me go on Amazon real quick. All right, I guess they're $75 now. Still, I would argue the best controller out there, right? The fact that these are $90 after tax, you're paying $100 basically. That's insane. Not to mention the grip is $35, right? So just to buy a second pair, you want to play multiplayer, because let's be honest, guys, Nintendo, stop lying to us. These are not 2 fucking controllers. Yes, you can use them as that, but they suck as 2 controllers, right? They just do. It's just not the best design in that regard. It's better than like not having 2 controllers, I guess, if you need to, but it's always been significantly worse for me, a significant worse experience playing with Switch stuff when I have just half of this, right? They are bigger, which is nice, but $90, and then you want to get, this, it's 100. How much is this? Like 125? 90 plus 35. Yeah, 125. That's absurd. $80. It's better to just get the Switch 2 Pro controller, assuming that there's no delay. That's absurd. Straps? Do they not? Okay, no, they come with straps. Ooh, boy, I'm about to be livid. Okay, the camera's $50. That's actually less than what I thought it was going to be. But still, if you get the camera for the game chat, you are up to $500 base, right? case isn't too bad. All-in-one sort of case, I guess, to bring more stuff with you. I'll probably just opt for this one. Charger isn't too bad. So I could see why maybe they like the presentation was great. Part of the reason why I think it was great was because they didn't bring up all these prices. $90. Okay. Here's what I'll say to finish out on the controllers. If they never drift and never break outside of the, the exceptions to the rules, right? Fine. But not fine. $90 is still insane for a price for controllers, right? There should be outrage about this. I want to see people outraged about the fact that this is, I get it, they're trying to lie to us and say that these are two controllers, and technically it is, but they suck as individual controllers, right? This being $80, I just cannot believe that this is better than the PlayStation 5 controller. It has these buttons here, right? So it's a little bit more mapping. So I will say that that's one thing that the base PlayStation 5 controller doesn't have. I'm trying to be fair, y'all, seriously. Like, I'm generally a PlayStation guy, but I've actually owned more Nintendo consoles in my life. Just generally, I enjoy playing on PlayStation in terms of the consoles the most. I bought the Switch, I didn't use it that much. Part of it was, things were breaking, and it's like, it was so expensive, as you guys can see, to replace your controllers and all that. This having these extra mapping buttons does rise it in stock for me as a controller, because I guess it is a pro controller, but to me it feels like it's just like an alternate controller. Like the previous one felt like more like an alternate controller. It's not like the PlayStation Pro or the Xbox Pro ones that like are like customizable and all that. You know what I mean? That being said, the fact that it's cheaper, one, it was also stupid. On Super Smash Bros, like the current one, you're gonna have 8 people play, right? But currently on the main Switch, these count as 2 controllers. So if you're trying to get 5 people to play, and you have like these, like if I'm using these 2 and the next person, it's like only 4 people can play before it's like, oh, you can't use any more because we're maxed out, right? If you have family, you have people come over, nephews, cousins, whatever, you might have 5 people that want to play, or 6. And the fact that these count as 2 controllers, even though it's like connected as like one person playing with both of them, I hope they fix that. It's a super specific gripe, but that's another kind of pro of this, is that this counts as one controller. So you could have 8 people playing with this if you want to, or 6 people and not having an issue, right? If you had like, 3 sets of this, right, that's 6 controllers in terms of Super Smash Bros, how it reads it. Super specific thing, but as Super Smash Bros was one of the main games I would play on the Switch with like my family, that's something that we ran into all the time, right? So to me, it's like it's crazy. Like, these back buttons make it more worth it. I think if they would have made it 70, I would have felt better, but 80, and then your actual standard like controllers that you're toting all the features of, and then like I've never really liked using them like individually when I'm playing like real, not real games, but like if I'm playing like Breath of the Wild or Super Smash Bros, something else, I like having it feel like one controller in my hand, having it connected, right, and all that. It's just the way that my fingers can like touch the buttons. I don't know why I said it like that. Like, I laughed at that. I'm a child. But it's like, it feels better when it's one controller, generally, to me, right? I think to most people. So that's actually pretty insane. The camera is not as expensive as I thought it was going to be. I would have foreseen this being like no less than like 80 or something, right? I didn't know. Oh yeah, they did say you could plug it directly into the Switch too if you're kind of more mobile. And not specifically the dock. Here's the thing, guys. If you just buy the Switch, right, And if you'll genuinely get use out of the camera, great. But if you just buy the Switch, I think it's great. Like generally for the price, assuming that the controllers aren't gonna drift after a month or two of playing, and you gotta replace them or live with drift. Assuming that the controllers aren't just bigger, maybe have more battery life or something, I don't know. But assuming they aren't just bigger and the actual quality of them is higher, then I would be happy with the base, like just buying the Switch as it is, right? Where Nintendo gets you is this: the initial buy-in really is almost always going to be more affordable than the initial buy-in of a lot of other consoles, PC, whatever. But to me, the long-term buy-in is how they get you, by not putting games on sale, by having controllers cost $90, which again, I don't know, but if they're anything like the Switch 1 controllers in terms of durability and quality, then you're buying more of these, especially if you have kids, right? Or if you just kind of get generally intense while playing a game, right? And so it's like, okay, in a weird way, buying one controller between these two, I know that's not exactly right, but that's $125, right? If you're trying to buy a second controller for somebody to play with, or you have it, your Switch docked, and then you just want to have this as well, right? It goes from 450. The Switch goes from 450 to 500 very quickly, right? That's the thing. It goes from 450 to 500 very quickly to get not truly necessary, but semi-necessary stuff, right? To undock or to dock it and have these and just want the feel of a controller, that $35 basically takes you to 500, right? Microphone takes you to 500. Case for your Switch, because that's the other thing. Like, if you're traveling with it, this is kind of necessary, right? You might have a bag that's already pretty nice, but if you just paid $450 for this, you probably want to, even if you have a laptop sort of bag that has a nice sort of, cushion and all that, you probably still want to get this, right? And honestly, you probably want to get this. But if if you have a backpack, this is more for if you're bringing it to somebody's house and you want to bring over all this stuff, right? This is more for when you're just kind of on the go and just having your backpack. I'll say this is practically necessary if you're ever taking it outside your house, which is the point, right? Kind of a Switch. So this is practically necessary. This, I won't say is necessary, but I think most people by default want this, right? And now we're over $500 when you could have just gotten a base PlayStation 5 controller. Again, PlayStation 5 isn't mobile, so that's a thing, but this for $75 included won't break, will have a much longer lifespan. You don't need to buy something like this to make it a controller, and you don't necessarily need to buy a case. The pros and cons, right? Part of the pros of the Switch is that it's mobile. The con, it's not even a con, but one thing you have to keep in mind is that you probably want a case now for your $450 machine, right? So it's $450 asterisk, but overall, still a very strong presentation. I don't know if I'll get one. I'll probably, maybe one day I'll get one eventually. To do maybe streaming stuff, but there's not really any games on there specifically for me that I can't already play on PC or PlayStation. I think Mario Kart looks fun. The thing is, like, I bought my Switch and I played like 3 games on it. And then I played like 2 Pokemon games and maybe had like Mario Kart or something else, right? And I think that's what would maybe happen. Well, I don't know, because the Nintendo Switch 2 is way more powerful, so maybe more games come out on it. But when it comes to like what is most comfortable, I'd rather have a PlayStation 5 controller in my hands, generally, right? Than a Switch controller in my hands. So for me, it's going to come down to the games. If they get enough games that are fun enough and speak to me, I can see myself getting it. But as it stands now, it's like, do I need another PlayStation 5? Basically, do I need another? Oh, I don't have an Xbox Series X, but like, to me, it's like now the Nintendo Switch 2 is no longer the more affordable, cheaper option. It's right there with PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series X. And now it's again a conversation of, if you had to choose one, which one would you pick? Right? Or if you have family members, like, all right, well, one of them will probably get it. You know what I mean? And so I think that's the interesting thing of this. This enters a new demographic or for Switch stuff, right? Of now you're right there with the other big dogs in terms of like price and quality in the console, right? In terms of fidelity of the games, during the 4K range, during the 60 frames, 4K potentially range, the 1080p, 120 frames range potentially, right? But by default is basically $500 because you need that case, right? You got to protect your $450 item. So I'm curious to see what people are saying about the price. I think if they would have been $400, I would have been less livid. But $90 for these 2 controllers, which generally, like the Switch controllers, don't feel good in my hands. I need this center part, and they show the center part at like with the Switch almost like it's like included, which is a great way to tell you that you need it like subtly, making you want it in your brain. But to get this, that's $35. Case 35, that's 70. That puts us at like 520 before tax. So I'm curious, guys, let me know in the comments, because this video has gone on longer. I didn't think the announcement was going to be an hour long. I think it was good because they showed the games. But let me know in the comments, guys, how you feel about it, the power of it, the price of it, the price of the accessories. That's really the crazy part. If the accessories would have been a more modest price, the controllers, but $90, guys, we made an outrage about the PlayStation 5 Pro being $700 as a console. Now we're having a conversation about controllers. This base controllers for the system weirdly are more expensive than the Pro, but the base controllers are $90. Guys, you get upset about the games going up in price, consoles going up in price, GPUs for PC, right? I'm curious to see if there's gonna be an outrage for these controllers. $90 for probably not the best controllers on the market is pretty insane.